Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Vintage Motocross Q&A. I'm your host, Joe Abadi. I want to thank Jordan Woodworth out in Oakland, who is helping me do this transmission here tonight. Of course, I want to thank Susie, too, and Chelsea, everyone that helps make this a show every week while we're going through this bit of a lockdown that we've been having. Jordan, I can't thank you enough. Right now, let's get down to the starting line. I'll tell you a little bit more about what's on the show. Tonight, we're going to be taking a look at a Husqvarna tank that I was working on this week. We're going to be blowing the lid off an old myth when it comes to aluminum and when it comes to heat. I'm going to show you a lot more about that a little bit later on. I think you're going to really enjoy it. In the Moto Showcase, Bill Nazarod has sent us in a beautiful Montesa GP250. The bike is outstanding. I'm looking forward to telling you more about it and showing you some details a little bit later on in the show. In the Here's the Problem segment, we're going to be talking about how to properly mount a seat cover. And this is both on a plastic seat base and on a metal seat base. I've got some good tips for you. I think you're going to enjoy it. In the What's It Worth segment, a 1974 YZ250 that recently sold on eBay. Even right now, as I'm bringing you this broadcast, I'm still a little up in the air about the price and how it went down with this bike. You'll see it a little bit later on. You'll be able to draw your own conclusion once I tell you about it. In the product spotlight, Preston Petty, we've got a great special coming to you tonight. MX front fenders in all colors. I'll tell you a bit about it later on in the show. These two kids, I just love them. They sent in this picture. They sent it to Jordan and asked if I would mention them on the show. Althea and Vaughn, they're little vintage motocross enthusiasts. And we sent them some stickers, and they love to go to the track. They love old bikes, and I wanted to just give a little shout out to them for being good sports and being fans of Vintage Motocross Q&A. What I'd like you to do right now is share the show. You can go on your phone or on your computer. You can share, tell your friends about it, and I'm going to get into something else just right now for a minute. We're not going to have the regular trivia that we normally have. We're going to be doing something with a Preston Petty product. Tonight, I'm going to be giving away a set of these grips. How are you going to win these grips? You're going to share the show. Just press that button, get some friends to come and join us here at Vintage Motocross Q&A. And later on in the show, Susie's going to come in with a random winner of this great set of Preston Petty grips, compliments of Paul Stennard and Preston Petty products. Don't forget we're on YouTube. And if you get a moment to go over there after the show is over, please go subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can watch it on your television once you subscribe. So if you're watching it on your phone or on your computer, you can actually kick back on your couch and watch this on television in high definition. But you got to go over there, become a subscriber to Vintage Motocross Q&A, and you can catch all the shows. Every one we do every week is already posted there. Within an hour or two after the show is done here on Facebook, Jordan goes over and he posts the show on YouTube, and you can watch it there. I really hope you can get over, subscribe to our channel, tell some friends about it too. As always, I want to thank our sponsors, Preston Petty Products, FastGuyStuff.com, Vinco, AMSOIL, and of course, Metro Racing out in Pennsylvania. While I have this up, I want to make a brief announcement. We're all being affected by the coronavirus and not being able to go to work. Some people can't go to work. Now, I know that some people are able to work from home like myself, FastGuyStuff.com, Preston Petty Products, Metro. They have a mail order business. So hopefully things are going real well for those folks. But people like AMSOIL, it's not so easy. I know Russell Waters has a lot of people out there on the road that he visits every week with AMSOIL products. And those companies are not running their trucks, they're not running their cars, and a lot of other things right now. So if you get an opportunity, go over to AMSOIL, give them a shout, buy some oil. It's something you're always going to be able to use. I just wanted to mention that. And Russell Waters and AMSOIL, thank you always for your shirts and for your wonderful products. Next time, try this. This is the segment of the show where I make a suggestion to you about some things that I try. And this week, we have something that's a little bit special. I was working on a Husqvarna tank earlier this week, and this is the tank right here. Now, we put together a video, and it's going to show you a little bit more about how we got this dent to the point that it's at, and we were using heat on it and a special pry bar that we've had made. But I'm going to share this information with you right now, and it's going to give you an idea of how you can maybe tackle something like an aluminum tank, and it doesn't have to be a Husqvarna tank, it can be any aluminum tank. You're gonna start by drilling a little hole in the bottom. Well, I don't wanna get too far ahead of myself. Jordan's got the picture up there right now. So as I was saying, you're gonna drill a little hole in the bottom of that tank. You're gonna drill a hole in the middle of where the dent is. Wherever that dent is, go toward the middle. This way you have access with whatever tool you're gonna be using to get in there to pry that area up. Also, before, and Jordan, no, you're good there. Go back there, Jordan, for a second. Let's stay with that. Because something I didn't take a picture of and I wanted to make clear. You're gonna have to go in with that drill at a little bit of an angle depending on where your dent is. To do that, you're gonna have to use one of the tiniest drills that you have, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, something very small. In order to do that, you should use a spring-loaded center punch to make a nice dent in there so you can get your drill started and you can keep it as straight as possible so it doesn't walk all around because you're gonna be on a little bit of an angle. Now, after you do that and you drill your little pilot hole, you're gonna go and figure out what tool you're gonna use to approach that dent. You're gonna use a step-up bit like this to drill it a little bit further. I use a tool like this. Now, I don't know if you could see it on the air. Yeah, you can see it on the screen. This is something that I had made from Daryl Dickerson, my welder. It's a piece of 3/8 steel tubing. It's hollow. It's got a little pitch here at the end, and it's got a round knob here at the top. That's where I go in there in those holes on those tanks, and I pry away at the dent that I'm trying to lift. Now, I think at this point, we can go to the video, and I'll explain a little bit more to you as we're taking a look at it. Jordan? I've also mounted up my tank in a vise with a bolt that goes across the front in the mounts. I use a magnet to find out where the tool is inside the tank. Now, using a regular bottle of MAP gas that you can buy at any hardware store or home improvement center, I begin to heat up the whole area of the dent. I don't get too close. I move that little torch about as much as I can. It's gonna get pretty hot. And as I do that, after a couple of minutes, I get that tool in there and I begin to pry away at that tank. I do use the magnet throughout this at times. Be careful if you do it after the tank is hot, the magnet can get hot as well. As you look at it in the video, you can see where at the bottom of the tank, where the dent starts to raise. And I move that flame around, work that whole area, keep it nice and warm, and I keep prying away with that pry bar. I had a little problem there where the old pinstriping was catching on fire, so I scraped it away with a file. Now, I go back in there while it's still warm, and I keep prying, and I begin to raise the dent. The thing you want to keep in mind is you want to raise that dent as much as you can from the bottom toward the top all the way across. You don't want to just start off in the middle of the tank, otherwise you have a bunch of little dents all around the middle of the dent. If you wind up with a high spot, if you take your body hammer like that, tap it down a little bit and get it back into shape. I use a bottle of water, a spray bottle with some ice in it, keep the water nice and cold. I spray it on there to keep everything cool down. Then I go back and follow up with my sanding block. As you can see right here, we've got a good section of that dent up. I go back after I sand it where I can see my high spots. I'll follow up again with the torch, get it warm, and begin to lift it up again with that pry tool, whatever you may use inside there. So you can see how big the dent was when we got started in the picture on the right. You can see where it is on the left. A lot of people will tell you, well, heat doesn't respond to, aluminum doesn't respond to heat, and it doesn't. It dissipates heat very, very quickly. You may not have a torch. You may not be skilled in that area. I'm not a metallurgist. I'm not a welder. I know, though, that MAP gas, in a situation like that, with an aluminum Husky tank, along with a tool like this, you can raise up that dent. Now, what you've seen there is only a fraction of the amount of time and work that's going to wind up going into that area. That little video there, and Jordan did a time lapse, took me well over an hour and a half, and that dent isn't even 25% back into shape. I just began to lift the majority of it, well, not the majority of it. I began to lift about 25% of it back into shape. There's a lot more prying, there's a lot more heat, and there'll be some sanding, a lot of sanding to do as well by the time we get to the end of that job. But if you're bold enough and you want to give it a try, a bottle of MAP gas And you could use most anything. It doesn't have to be a special tool like I've had made here. There's instances where I have used bolts to get in there. I have, you know what? I happen to have it right here in front of me. This rod it's rectangular. It's square, actually. This was part of a rotisserie to a grill. Got a pointy end on it where you poke it through a rib roast or whatever it is you were cooking. I bent it up on the end, and sometimes I get in there with that as well, on a dent with a crease, because it's got a real nice point on it. So if I have a dent with a crease, I'll heat up that area and I'll get in there with this. There really is no science to it as far as what type of tool you're going to use. Yes, you'll hear from people who do paintless dent removal that there are certain tools that they do it with. That's on a door skin or a skin of a fender of a car that is nowhere near the thickness of a gas tank. So with that in mind, with a bottle of MAP gas and some tools that you could probably make at home, you can make an attempt on getting some of the dents out of those aluminum tanks. Jordan, thanks for editing that video. You did a great job on that. If anybody has any questions, you could always send me a message and I'll give you a little bit more information on how to approach some dents in aluminum gas tanks. I love this bike. Bill Nazelrod said in 1969 Montesa 250 GP. The bike is outstanding, and as Jordan rolls through these pictures a little bit, I'm going to read to you a little bit about the bike. Bill says that he acquired this bike in the early 1990s as my interest in armored vintage motocross began. The restoration started in 1996 with the intention this bike be used for competition. Most of the parts needed for restoration were NOS and carefully refurbished in every way. The bike itself was a true barn find. The day it was taken, this day, it was taken from Schaefer Motor Company in Orange, Virginia. The bike was originally brought in for service, and that's where Bill Nazelrod was able to purchase it. At that time, the internet was not that prevalent, and people were having extreme difficulty finding parts for something like this. It is 100% period correct. The bike itself was very much intact. The numbers were matching. The bike had a connecting rod failure. That's what caused the problem while it went in for service. Bill tells us that he was able to purchase a lot of the parts after the internet became prevalent from Jared Bates. He also says, I actually didn't finish the build until 20 years later. Mike Slate saw the bike and encouraged me to get it up and completed. As he claimed, and not too many people have actually seen one in person. The bike was a limited production model from Montesa. This bike was shown at 2016 at the annual Potomac Vintage Rider Swap Meet and Show, and it has also been on display at the Broom Factory ever since. Bill Nazelrod, I want to thank you for sending in that amazing Montesa. The contrast between the white frame, the orange fiberglass with the green, it is absolutely outstanding. I couldn't stop staring at the polished aluminum. Bill Nazelrod for sending in that beautiful bike to us here for the Moto Showcase. I'm going to be sending you some stickers from fastguystuff.com. Thanks again, Bill. Here's the problem. This is the segment of the show where we take your questions throughout the week. We do a little research on them, and we try and help you out with some good answers. We share them here on the show and hope that we can share that information with other viewers as well. Jordan, let's get to the first question. Tim Sullivan, I've used a jet cleaning tool, but sometimes the smaller jets are so clogged that it's difficult to remove the buildup inside of them. What would you suggest I try to ensure a better result? Of course, Tim Sullivan is talking about jets in a carburetor. In the next slide, you'll see what we're talking about here. Down at the bottom of the picture, you'll see some pilot jets, and the holes in pilot jets are very, very small. They're small in all the jets throughout the carburetor, whether it's a main jet, pilot jet, whatever it may be. Now, Tim said that he used a jet cleaning tool. That's what you see up there on the left. They're like these little round files, and they also come with brushes. You got to be careful with them because you don't want to file or push that file in there and make that jet any bigger. The difference between the sizes of jets is minuscule, and getting in there with that file to clean them out, you don't want to actually bore them out and make them any bigger. The tool to the left of the blue anodized tool with the brushes on it, those are always best, but sometimes they're a little bit too big to get inside of those jets. What I would recommend is that you use this product right here. It's called Chem Dip. It's really, really good, and it comes with a basket inside of it with very, very fine holes. The basket is like almost like a screen door. You could take your carburetor completely apart, put everything inside there, dunk it in there, and let it sit overnight or for a day or two if you have to. When you get it back out of there, the jets are going to be really, really clean. And at that point, you might be able to use your jet cleaning tool a little bit more if you have to in order to get the rest of the debris or anything that's inside that jet out. Most of the time, you won't have any problem after the chem dip. If you do, and you just want to ensure that you're going to get them a little bit cleaner, I would recommend using some gum out carburetor cleaner. Be very, very careful when you use it. Not so much when you use the carb cleaner, but if you're going to blow them out with a little compressed air, the jets are so small, you don't want to lose them. So be careful when you use compressed air. Use it at a very, very low pressure, and use a little carb cleaner to clean them out after you use the chem dip. Thanks for the question. I hope we shed some light on that for you there, Tim. What do we got next, Jordan? Another question from Tim Sullivan. You know, while I'm thinking about this, there's 2 questions from Tim Sullivan this week. I often put up a post on Facebook about sending in your questions to me at Vintage Motocross Q&A. It's always a good time to do that. A lot of times people will send them in on Wednesday. There's not enough time for me to do research. There's other work to be done throughout the day before I get ready for the show. Send your questions in at any time. Send them in tonight, whatever might be on your mind. It's never a bad time to send in the question to Vintage Motocross Q&A. But getting back to Tim's second question, do you have any advice for installing seat covers? Yeah, I do. The first thing you want to do is make sure you get a quality cover, wherever that may be from. The first step you're going to take, especially if you have a logo on the back of that seat, is to make sure the logo is exactly where it should be on the back of the seat. That's where you're going to begin. Also, as you can see in this picture with this Kawasaki, there's a stitch going across there. You want to make sure that that's exactly where it's supposed to be. Some seats have piping on it. The piping sits right on top of the seat. Some have stitching like this. They sit just below that. If you can, do a little research or take pictures of your old seat cover before you take that off, and make sure you know where that logo and where that stitch is supposed to be. Jordan, next slide. When you get started and you know where that logo is supposed to be, staple the seat at the back first, then stretch it and go toward the front. In this case, and we're going to get on to another slide in a moment, but in this case, it happens to be a plastic base. So a good strong stapler will get you through on that. Some guys use air staplers. I use an electric one. It works great. They're available at Home Depot with a variety of different size staples. And make sure you staple straight down into the base, that you have enough leather or vinyl left over that goes into or onto the base. Don't try and go through the side. In the next slide, you'll see what I'm talking about, I think. Here, where you see the staples, in the slide that you're looking at, in other words, if you look to the right, you'll see the staples right down into the base. Now, there's a lip along the bottom of your seat where it folds underneath. Don't be tempted or don't lose your concentration. Get your staple gun and put it through the side, no matter how short the staples are, because you're going to wind up going right through the side. The foam is very thin there, and the staple is going to go right through the seat cover. Yes, I did it. Next thing you know, you have a brand new seat cover that costs you 40, 50, 60 bucks, and it's got 2 little pinholes in it. You're going to be out buying another seat cover. So be careful. Make sure you have enough material that it's flat on the base, and you can put your staples down into that plastic base. Jordan, next slide. Before you even get to the cover, make sure your foam is secured on the base. Now, you may have a steel base and you're not going to paint it or do anything with it. I would sand it, get it all cleaned up, clean it up with some acetone or whatever you have to give yourself a nice, clean surface to spray on some adhesive like you see here. Once you put that cover on, if that foam is loose, it's not going to turn out very well for you at all. So you want to make sure that that foam is really firm and solid on the seat base. Use a product like this, like Loctite spray adhesive. Now, away from the plastic base for a minute, let's look at this metal base. On these metal bases, many times you have prongs that go around the perimeter of the seat base, like a triangle shape. Now, we're all working on bikes that are 40, 45, 50 years old. When you go to take that cover off and you pry those little prongs up, those little triangle steel things, they're probably going to break off. You might get lucky. They may not break off. Your seat base may not be rusted. It may be in good shape. Be careful when you pry those up, when you go to take off your seat and when you prepare it to get your new seat cover to put on. If you do run into that problem and those things break off, in the next slide, I'll show you what I did. I use rivets. I bent all those little prongs in. I carefully took my drill with rivets. I put a little bit of a bigger washer on that rivet, and I put it all around the perimeter, as you can see here. It's a lot more difficult to do it this way. but sometimes you really have no choice. You got to be careful. Again, just follow the steps I told you at the beginning of this segment. Do the back first, do the front, get it good and stretched out, and then do the sides. Keep your eye on that logo on the back. Keep your eye on where the stitching is too along the bottom, because sometimes it isn't one piece all the way around. So manufacturers may add on an extra inch or so to give you that extra material to secure it to the bottom of the base. If you follow my instructions, make sure you get that foam down securely. Do the front first, do the back, or the back first, then the front, and take your time. Take your time doing that. You get a nice job like that on that Kawasaki seat right there. Tim Sullivan, thanks for the question. I need a sip of water. Hang on a second, guys. John Hayes. For a newcomer to vintage motocross, are there bikes guys should stay away from due to parts costs and restoration expense? You should stay out of vintage motocross if you're not looking to spend a lot of money. I am kind of serious about that. Prices have escalated so much, especially on parts, as sources are beginning to dry up. Yes, there are a lot of reproduction parts out there, but even those sometimes are getting a little difficult to purchase. What I would recommend if you're a newcomer to the hobby, I would look for a bike that is relatively inexpensive but reliable, and something that there are plenty of parts for. In the next slide, I'll give you my recommendations on that. Number one, I'd recommend the Yamaha. Now we're talking about vintage here, twin shock 74 and back. I would consider a Yamaha MX 125, 250, or 360, depending on what size bike you want. There are a lot of them out there. Parts are still available for them. They're pretty reliable too. Not the most competitive bike in the vintage class, but you're a beginner. Let's get your feet wet. Let's get in there, and let's not spend a bunch of money to the point of, well, it costs too much and it's no fun for you anymore. Another bike I would recommend, to me, it's always been the most underrated bike, and it's not really vintage. It's like a post-vintage thing. The Yamaha 250 MX-B, 75 Yamaha MX 250B. That's the red, white, and black bike there on the bottom. It does have the monoshock. I like this bike because it shares engine parts with the 1976 YZ 250C. Both numbers begin with 509. Parts are pretty much available for that bike as well as far as engine parts go, for a simple reason, no disrespect intended, because I'm a Yamaha guy since way back. The YZ 250C wasn't the most competitive bike in the world at that time. And today, you know, guys being 45, 50, 60 years old, I don't think it really matters that much. But it's a great bike. They're not very expensive. Parts are readily available for them. Wheels are the same on many of these bikes throughout that era. For that 75 250B, 76, 77 wheels fit. I think 78 may even fit that bike as well. If I were going out there to race vintage right now, I'd get myself a CZ. Why? It's the most reliable vintage bike going. And again, I'm going back to the vintage twin shock 74 era. The most reliable bike going. Parts are very, very easy to find for CZs. They're exceptionally reliable. Parts are easy to find. Guys are out there making gas tanks for them, or there's always plastic tanks available. Fork kits, I mean, when I think about it, you got C&R Performance down there in Southern California. He's putting a lot of parts out for these bikes. Dave Boydston always seems to have a good supply of parts for these. And also, if you go on eBay or some of your swap meet pages, you're going to find what you're looking for. And in the long run, it's the most reliable bike out there. You'll always get your money out of it too. So, in answer to your question, should you stay away from some things? Yeah. But as a beginner, as an amateur just getting into vintage motocross, these are some of your best bets. You know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, Can-Am would be a good one too. That's a great bike to have. But if you're looking to get into the sport and are thinking about getting a 250 Elsinore 74 or a YZ 250, and you know what? The stuff for your European bikes has really risen too. Whether it's Husky or Osa, it's getting a little costly. And I've said this for years to people too, where they'll talk about how much people spend to restore a bike. You're in a far more expensive hobby than you realize, my friend. You just don't want to take a look at it. Anyway, great question. I hope that sheds some light on it for you. What do we got next, Jordan? In the What's It Worth segment, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm still like up in the air. Like the jury's not out on this 1974 YZ250 that recently sold on eBay for $7,100. And it wasn't long ago you could go out and buy a bike like this. And when I say not long ago, I'm talking about the last 18 to 24 months, where you could go out and buy a YZ250 in need of restoration. I remember them at $2,500, but that really wasn't when the market was that great. As it got really a little bit stronger, past 18 months, 2 years, they started to climb a little bit, $3,000, $3,500. But if you wanted one, especially at a race, you can go out and buy one that you could rebuild, have a good time on it for like $3,500. Doesn't seem to be that way anymore. It's even hard to find those bikes. But this 74 YZ250 went for $7,100. What did I like about the bike? Well, I like the fact that it was fairly complete. It wasn't really a full restoration. I wouldn't even think it was close to being considered a restoration. Why it had a kickstand on it, I have no idea. 74 YZ250 didn't have a kickstand on it. Some other things that I found interesting on the bike as I examined the pictures, it had 75 forks and it had a 75 rear brake plate. The rear brake plate didn't bother me. Most people would miss the forks. It didn't have a silencer, and they're kind of tough to find. It had the wrong Kickstarter, and just the description where the owner of the bike or the seller of the bike said that it was original. It's not original, and it's got some unusual things incorrect about the bike. So $7,100, I thought that was a lot of dough for that bike. Then again, I'm just not seeing that $3,500 to $4,000 YZ250A anymore. So again, the jury's not out, but if I had to make a decision right now, if somebody said, Joe, too much or not enough, I'd say too much. Great bike, I own one. Too much at $7,100 for that bike. In the product spotlight, Preston Petty. As always, Preston Petty products. We are a authorized dealer for Preston Petty, but throughout all the specials every week, many of you are going to buy products directly from their website, and that's great. You don't have to buy them from me. It's wonderful that you go over to Preston Petty and you get all that great stuff that we've grown accustomed to throughout all of our years in motocross. So I want to thank Paul Stannard and Preston Petty, as always, for being sponsors of the show. We're waiting for a new number plate to come in, autographed by Preston himself, and we'll be giving those away in some weeks to come. Again, just a reminder, if you're sharing the show, you got an opportunity to win a nice set of these grips, Works GP grips from Preston Petty. This week's special, we've got the MX front fenders, and they're in all colors, as you can see right here, white, silver, black, yellow. Oh, and speaking of yellow, and not only the Suzuki yellow, he's got them in that Yamaha yellow too, which is a little bit different. Got the orange ones for the Can-Ams. You got the white fenders for you guys that want white on your bikes. This week's special, $44.95, $10 off the regular price. Inbox me for the coupon code. I'll give it to you when you go over to the Preston Petty website. When you check out, there's a little discount code thing on the bottom. You'll put in the code that I give you. You'll get $10 off Preston Petty MX front fenders this week. I think Paul generally runs these specials right through Friday night. But if you miss it and you get there on Saturday or Sunday or something happens, drop me an email. I'll make sure Paul gets the information, and we'll make sure you get the discount from Preston Petty products. I love this commercial. Don't forget, while we're going through this, all of us together with this lockdown, a lot of retailers are closed. Some of the guys are actually still in the mail order business, and they're helping out a lot of us. You can go over to Vinco, order some parts. They've got some great specials over there all the time. Jordan, let's see what the Vinco commercial looks like.
Classic and vintage dirt bikes are more than a hobby. It's not just about the ride. It's about the work that goes in. The work that keeps you connected to the ride. It's about bringing the bike back to life and doing it with your own hands. It's about the adrenaline and adventure. And when it comes to putting all the pieces together, only Vinco knows the bikes and parts the way you do. Vinco, keep the ride going.
This week in MX history. You know, I do a little research every week on this, and I always find it so interesting. And I'm happy to tell you that on this day, at Lake Whitney, the Lake Whitney Cycle Ranch out in Texas, it was an AMA National, and my good friend Donnie Hansen won his first outdoor national on this day in 1982. Donnie Hansen, of course, went on to win the Supercross Championship and the Outdoor National Championship in 1982. Donnie finished that day ahead of Brock Glover and David Bailey. All those years ago, Donnie Hansen, congratulations on your successful career. I think we're going to have you on our Vintage Motocross radio show in the not too distant future. But Donnie Hansen, certainly a legend and a hero, and that's what happened on this day in motocross history. Announcements, we've got some good ones for you this week. We've got a winner for the Preston Petty grips. As I told you at the beginning of the show, people who share it get an opportunity to win a set of grips. And Susie came in with this little piece of paper. It says that Tom Dawe, D-A-W-E, Tom Dawe, a real big supporter of the show, shares it after the show is over quite a bit every week. So does Joe Anderson, so does Sam Floridia, so do so many of you guys. I don't want to leave anybody out. But Tom Dawe shared it a lot here tonight, and I want to thank Tom Dawe for doing that. Tom, if you send me your address in my inbox, I'll get you out this nice set of Preston Petty grips, compliment of Paul Stannard and Preston Petty products. Thanks, Tom. VMX Radio. This is something I started, and our first show was last week. It's on Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. My first guest last week happened to be, he was amazing. He made my job so easy. My first guest last week happened to be Warren Reed. We will be on again this Sunday, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my guest. But right now, I'm going to, Jordan's actually going to run some clips regarding the video. Some really interesting little sound bites here given to us by Warren Reed throughout his interview. And he had so many interesting things to say about when he was a kid growing up. Well, you listen to this and you'll hear some of the sound bites.
And I tell you what, and those guys, I was just, the little kid. I signed with Kawasaki right at the end of the 79 Trans Am, and left Honda. It was, that's a whole hour in itself, so we won't go into that. But I went to Kawasaki and did my contract ending, a month early with Honda, and then raced the Kawasaki as Superbikers. And I'd never, ridden on the pavement before, except my bicycle, and or running from the cops if they caught me at a field riding my mini bike or something. Just being around the best guys, that absolutely makes you see what you have to do.
Yeah.
You almost can't control the shock and everything else. And so by making it stiff, you can. Well, that also helps you go across the tops of the bumps and commit. So in the heat race at the Pittsburgh Supercross, I beat Jeff Ward in one of the heats, and I beat David Bailey, who won the Supercross championship that year in the semi. And then I think Brock won, David got second, I got third in the main event. I made a bet to Ricky Johnson, I'll go wide open through those, and he said, "You will not." I said, "I will too." Watch. So it was, it worked. When I was 15, I made remember Yamaha had those twin shock bicycles?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, my brother had one, and I took that and made it into a monoshock. I made the rear triangle and put the shock underneath the top tube and made a monoshock bicycle in 74 when I was 15 in my garage.
Wow.
I wish I had that. I should have patented that when I look at all the mountain bikes now with the shock, underneath the top tube and everything.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're referring to. Sure, it's called the Moto bike. I hope you enjoyed some of those clips from last week's interview on Vintage Motocross Radio, which is different than the show you're watching. You're watching Vintage Motocross Q&A, which is here on Facebook on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Vintage Motocross Radio is on Sundays at 4 p.m. This week, we have Scott Burnworth. That's right. This Sunday, we will be live with Scott Burnworth at Vintage Motocross Radio. So be sure to get on Facebook Sunday afternoon. Unfortunately, there's no baseball, there's no football, there's no sports. So why not tune in to Vintage Motocross Radio to hear my conversation live with Scott Burnworth. I'm really looking forward to it. Happy birthday, Gary Jones. I'm not going to sing. 65 years old, Gary Jones. Happy birthday today. Such a big contributor to motocross throughout your years. You, your dad, of course, your brother. So much to do with the history of vintage motocross. Happy birthday, Gary Jones. That picture was actually taken on my birthday a few years ago. We were at Chris Carter's house. Happy birthday, Gary Jones. 65 big ones. You can get a check now from the government, maybe, huh? VMX Magazine. This is a great bargain right now. I'd like you to go over there after the show's over. Either subscribe or renew your subscription to VMX Magazine. Right now, the Aussie dollar is a little bit low. The virus thing is hurting a lot of people. So for 55 bucks, which is like, I think it's like 20 bucks off of the price that it was just a few months ago. Go over to VMX Magazine after the show's over, get a subscription, It's been such a great magazine for almost, I think, like 20 years now. Ken Smith has done a great job covering events throughout the world, giving people a beautiful a venue to show their bikes. He's done so much for the industry, so much in supporting vintage motocross. So go over to VMX Magazine after the show's over, and I've been saying this for a couple of weeks now. If Paul tells me, or if Ken tells me that 10 people have purchased VMX Magazine, have subscribed, 10 people, we'll give away one free here on the show. I'll give away a subscription. Go over to VMX. They could really use your support right now, just like everybody else could. GTL Metal Polishing. George Lucas is still at it, buffing that metal out like nobody's business out there in New Jersey. GTL Metal Polishing specializes in all types of chrome, metal, and aluminum polishing. He does a great job on cars. He's also a vintage motocross enthusiast and do a great job on the rims and hardware for your bike. GTL Metal Polishing. They're on Facebook. They're on Instagram. They're on YouTube. They're everywhere. Check out GTL. I want to thank FastGuyStuff.com, as always, Sean Gomes, for sending us in those beautiful stickers that we give away every week to the lucky winners who send a bike in for the Moto Showcase. While I'm thinking about it, send your bike to me in the Moto Showcase. Send it in early. Send in the questions early, too. The earlier you send them in, the better it is for me to get them over to Jordan. We can make slides. Otherwise, if you wait too late, like if you wait till Wednesday, it goes into the next week. If you send them a little bit earlier, we can start to get things moving a little bit earlier. It makes it a lot easier on Jordan. It makes it a lot easier on me. So anybody with Bikes for the Moto Showcase. Oh, and I put up an album. I put up an album on the page for contributors to the Moto Showcase. All your bikes are up there on the page right now. But again, thank you, Sean Gomes, FastGuyStuff.com, for all your support and for the stickers that you've given us throughout the years. I know it's the wrong time to ask for money. A lot of people are not doing so well right now, but sponsorship opportunities are there for you here at Vintage Motocross Q&A. Inbox me. I'll be glad to send you a proposal. Vinco's doing it. AMSOIL, FastGuyStuff.com, Preston Petty products. I'm sure I've got something that will fit your budget as well. And you know, maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be a vintage motocross related part. Maybe you've got something else out there that people would be interested in the age bracket of people that watch this show. Let's talk about some ideas. Let's custom tailor something that's going to be good for you. Become a sponsor here on Vintage Motocross Q&A. Once this thing gets to YouTube and we're not that far away, things are going to get wild. You're going to be seeing a lot of people. There's going to be a lot of hits on the videos. Now would be a real good time to get in touch with me about sponsorship opportunities. That's it for Vintage Motocross Q&A. I want to thank everybody who watched tonight. I want to thank Tom Daw, Joe Anderson, Sam Floridia, so many people who share the show after the show is over. As always, I want to thank Jordan Woodworth for his dedication to the show and all the good things that he does. Susie, Chelsea, everybody, be safe out there. We'll see you all next week. Don't forget my Sunday show, Vintage Motocross Radio. But we will see you next week on Vintage Motocross Q&A.